Welcome, everyone. I'm pleased to have you join us this morning for a webinar on the science of reading. Our webinar is presented by Jane Verlin, the lower school head at Green Farms Academy, Kelly Raymond, the learning specialist, and Cynthia Homan, the reading specialist. So they're going to focus this morning on the science of reading and how one school, their school, has made the changes to empower faculty to shift from a balanced literacy approach to incorporating direct reading instruction. And I'm really pleased that they're here to join us. By the registration, this is a topic where there's a lot of interest, and as an avid reader, I'm always happy to talk about reading. And we'll turn this over to Jane.
Thank you so much, Beth, and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining this morning. And we're thrilled to share with you a little bit about, Greens Farms Academy. We know it as GFA to us, our home. And we're thrilled to share our story about our process. Just to give you a little background and a little context, actually, Cynthia, there we are. There are the three of us. And if you want to just shift to setting the stage, Cynthia, that would be great. We are a pre-K, there we are, there's our mansion. We are a pre-K through 12 independent school in Westport, Connecticut. Our lower school consists of pre-K through grade 4. We have approximately 160 students in lower school, depending on the year. And we have in every homeroom, there's a lead teacher and an associate teacher. And we, for today, I'm joined by Dr. Kelly Raymond, who is, as Beth mentioned, our learning specialist, and Cynthia Homan, who's a full-time reading specialist. And we also, not with us today, is one other part-time reading specialist. So we have a great team. And again, we're thrilled to share with you a little bit about our story. Kelly will share a little bit about the why and talk a little bit about truly the science of reading. And then I'll get into how we as a school, from a bigger picture of pre-K through 12, how we as a division and how we specifically as a team helped empower our teachers to get practices that align with the science of reading. And then Cynthia will share a little bit more about what that truly looks like in practice and how she worked specifically at some of the grade levels to support this transition. So thank you again for joining us, and I'll hand it over to Kelly to share a little bit about the why. I think you're muted, Kelly.
Yep.
Of course, I was going to be the first one to do that. Get it out of the way. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're so excited to talk to you about one of our great passions here at GFA, reading. And basically, 3 years ago, in the midst of a global pandemic, we decided that we were going to shift our reading instruction from a balanced literacy approach to a structured literacy approach that aligned with the science of reading. No small task, but you know what? Our teachers, I think teachers in general want to teach reading effectively. And so, although there were times that this was challenging and difficult, it's very empowering work. In order to be able to do this effectively, one of the first things that we did is we really educated our teachers about the science of reading. We had to break some myths in that process. And I think one of the most overriding myths about reading just in general is that learning to read is natural. How many of you teachers used to have posters in your classroom like reading is natural? It's a very common belief and myth. So the idea that you just surround students with books right? Surround them with books, create an environment that's literacy rich and inviting, and they'll learn to and support them, and do some mini lessons, and they'll learn to read. This is, the roots of the whole language movement. In reality, learning to read is one of the most unnatural things that we humans learn to do. While language is natural, where our brains are wired for language, our brains are not wired for reading. Reading has to be taught. So one of the things, or some of the topics that we decided that our teachers needed to really understand to effectively teach reading in the classroom, was they have to have a basic understanding of the science of reading, what that really means. And we'll talk a little bit about that. They need to understand brain anatomy and the function of the reading brain, the structure of the English language, and the developmental stages of reading. Reading is not an age, it's a stage. So it's important to, have a basic understanding of these areas. Another reason this is important is the idea that this is not a swing of the pendulum. Like, you're not going to be able to wait it out, because we have, scientific research that tells us how the brain learns to read, and data and research on the most effective ways of teaching children to read. Okay, so I have a task for you. Do not read the next slide, just count the words. You can't do it. You literally just cannot do it. It happens, it feels like almost instantaneously. And all of you can read this slide what feels like instantaneously because of a teacher. Like, thank a teacher, because they made an actual anatomical change in your brain to allow you to read this slide effortlessly and instantaneously. Okay. Okay, this is Stanislas Dehaene. He is awesome. If you ever get to see him speak or read any of his books, he is a researcher on basically how the brain learns. Like, he has books about math, he has books about reading. And I want to show you just a short clip of how, like, the brain, a brain image while someone is reading a word. So we're gonna. Uh-oh. Oh, you know what, Cynthia? I think we can't hear it because you need to unmute.
Left hemisphere, the left hemisphere of the brain is most essential for language and reading. And just to orient you, this is the back of the brain, this is the front of the brain. It's been slightly inflated, so you can see inside the folds. And now I want to show you the activation of the brain as you read one word. We see it in time. So let me start this. Here we go. And you have the word unfolding from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. It will loop several times. You can see the information enters into the occipital pole, which is the visual side of the brain, moves into the ventral areas, and then explodes into the left hemisphere distributed activity.
Okay, thank you. So it happens very, very quickly. That said, and that's why there's such a myth that reading is a visual activity. It's really not. It's not solely visual. Vision is the mode with which we read, but kids don't have, for the most part, do not have difficulty because they're seeing letters backwards or, upside down, not any of those myths. The truth is that reading starts with vision, that's the mode. But it's just the input. So the stimulus goes through the occipital lobe, to the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is activated first. That's the yellow regions on this slide. And that's the phonology or the pronunciation of the word. So literally learning to read is speech to print. And then the temporal lobe connects the meaning to the word. So it's almost like a little triangle. It goes in through the occipital lobe, to the frontal lobe, to the temporal lobe to connect the meaning. The yellow and green areas that you see, those are developed through oral language, and those are wired already for oral language. Our brain is wired for communication, for language. And what's really important and interesting to understand is those same areas of the brain that we are naturally wired for are activated when we're comprehending reading. So you can teach reading comprehension through read alouds, through listening to books. Those are all activities that strengthen that part of the brain. You don't just have to teach reading comprehension with reading. Now, the area that teachers really develop, and actually there's an anatomical change, is that visual word form area. So through practice and mapping the letters of the word to the sounds of the word, orthographic mapping, that area of the brain is developed, and it's called either the visual word form area, or Dahane calls it the letterbox. That needs to be taught. That needs to be taught directly. But that's the area that makes it so that we can read quickly. That's where all the sight words, those words that you just have instantaneously, like that slide that you read, are stored. It's not all or none. Like there's, there's a degree, it's in degrees. So better readers have a more developed letterbox, less better readers, less so. The reality, though, is that we read words, we process them letter by letter, even the words that we have stored as sight words. Okay, so proficient reading happens on the right side of the brain. So strong readers, the right side of their brain lights up when they read words. Struggling readers, the left side of their brain lights up. So when you're teaching the 3 cueing method, you're actually, or you're using those strategies, you're actually strengthening the right side of the brain, the side of the brain that struggling readers use to read and comprehend text. So no teacher wants to do that. So this understanding the why of why we're making this shift, why we're making these changes, why what you're doing is working or not working is just crucial and very empowering for teachers to understand. Okay. Science of reading is a program or a pedagogy myth. Dr. Louisa Moats has a wonderful definition of the science of reading. She describes it as a body of scientific research that is not an ideology, not a philosophy, not a political agenda. It's not one size fits all. It's not a specific program of instruction, nor a specific component of instruction. It's a consensus of related disciplines based on thousands of studies, supported by hundreds of millions of research dollars, conducted across the world in many languages. And what we've learned a great deal about how the brain learns to read, what goes wrong when students are having difficulty, and what kind of instruction is most likely to be successful. You know, that said, science is always ever evolving. We are going to learn better instructional manual or methods, but we know how the brain learns to read. And again, this is not new. The idea that this is the new science of research just is not true. It's based on decades of research, at least 4 decades of research. The National Reading Panel, that happened almost 25 years ago. You know, this is not new information or new research. Okay. So again, it's not a program, it's not just phonics, and you know, our work will never be done. Curriculum doesn't teach children to read. Well-trained teachers teach children to read. Teachers who understand why they're doing what they're doing. Okay. The science of reading aligned practice emphasizes phonics only. No. Just not true. This is an infogram from almost a quarter of a century ago. It's from the early 2000s. This is not new information. So what it shows us is reading is a multifaceted skill acquired over years of instruction and practice. If you look down at the word recognition, that becomes increasingly automatic with practice, and the language comprehension becomes increasingly strategic. Something that I think is really important for teachers to understand, that word recognition part, if you look at it, it's a braid. So that phonological awareness, the decoding and spelling, the sight word recognition or the sight recognition, it's a braid. If one of those stops, the rope breaks, like it stops. If one of those is broken, the rope is broken. If you look at the language comprehension, that's more what our brain is wired for. That word recognition needs to be directly and systematically taught. It's more of a twist. If one of those is broken, it absolutely affects the strength of the reading comprehension or the language comprehension, but it doesn't stop it. There's you know, other components of reading comprehension. So that's why we do focus a lot, and we do take very seriously that word recognition part of the equation, because we know that word recognition is a necessary but not sufficient component of reading. Children are not going to enjoy reading if they cannot lift the words off the page. So this brings us to the simple view of reading. Again, this is not new information. I think this was 1986. And this idea or this visualization has stood the test of time. And this is what we teach. We teach those 5 pillars of reading: phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, language comprehension, fluency, and reading comprehension, that the reading panel highlighted in the early 2000s. I love this particular slide because it really kind of brings it home that if you have a solid 1 in word recognition, but your language comprehension is weak, it's going to affect your reading comprehension. So if you have a weak word recognition, so for example, if you had 0.9 word recognition, which really isn't that weak, and you had a good solid 1 language comprehension, your reading comprehension would only be 0.9. So that decoding will negatively affect reading comprehension. I think we all know those kids who are have such good language comprehension that they compensate and it looks like they have excellent reading. But if they have some weaknesses on that word recognition component, it will affect their reading comprehension. Okay, next myth. Structured literacy is only for those students who need it. It's really just for dyslexic students, right? I mean, those are the ones who need it. Everybody else, they'll be fine without it. Again, not really. While it's true that one size does not fit all, and everyone's brain learns to read the same way, sorry, one size does not fit all. However, everyone's brain does learn to read the same way. We decode and map words for automatic reading. Some students appear to do it effortlessly. If you look at the work of Nancy Young and the Ladder of Reading and Writing, about 5% really do it effortlessly. Another 35%, it's relatively easy for. So only about 40% of the population learns to read relatively easily. The rest need explicit instruction, and the 10 to 20% of dyslexic students need explicit and systematic instruction with a lot of repetition. Not something radically different than what should be happening in the regular classroom, but just more broken down, more systematic, with more repetition. So, you know, English is so complex. Yes, that is true. English, we have one of the largest vocabularies in the world. We have embodied many different languages. Our origins of our language comes from, you know, Greek, Latin. It is complicated, it is complex, very, very true. Our spelling is tricky. It is not easy. That said, if you have a strong understanding of the structure of the English language, about 95% of English language is decodable. So it's worth it for teachers to understand this. It's empowering for teachers to have, you know, a basic knowledge about how the brain learns to read and the structure of the English language. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jane, because in this work, it is absolutely imperative to have administrative support. You know, it's hard work, change is hard, and you need to have administrative support. You can't just give teachers a curriculum and even the information and just say, good luck. You know, it doesn't work that way. So thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Kelly. And as I mentioned at the start, I'll just start by sharing. Oh, my lights just went out. 1 second, sorry. Sorry about that. Sustainable lighting here at GFA. As I shared at the start, what I'll do is just try to story tell a little bit what this looked like as an entire lower school community, making the shift and starting to align our practices more with the science of reading and I'll do that under 2 main topics, as you know, time and space, which is actually one of GFA's strategic principles, and then the other is resources. And then from there, I'll hand it over to Cynthia, who will share with you a little bit more specifically about what the work looked like at the different grade levels. So thank you, Cynthia. Here it says, making it a priority. For us, carving out time and space for our teachers to come together, to learn from one another, to collaborate was incredibly important. And as an administrator, alongside my administrative colleagues, our head of school, this was a very conscious decision for us, you know, to put other things to the side. There's always that, oh, wow, but, you know, now feels like the right time to, you know, reevaluate our math program, and ooh, let's take a look at, you know, this other, or the social emotional piece, which are all still equally as important to us. But as it connected to how we were going to support our teachers in making this shift, we really needed to carve out time and say, okay, anything that I could be putting in email that's not going to take up meeting time and space, I'm going to put it in an email, because, you know, this Thursday's faculty meeting has to be devoted to learning more about reading. And so our initial hope was to help engage teachers by just sharing knowledge with them in somewhat the same way that Kelly has done. I remember those myths, Kelly, from a few years ago, where Kelly, being our in-house expert, how lucky for us, was presenting to the rest of the lower school on a few occasions. We broke it up over time. In here, there's one picture you can see us. I think that was in 2021, maybe over Zoom. So really committing to the work. And Kelly played a really key role in helping our teachers understand the why in a really informative and non-judgmental way, which is really important because as educators, and I'll speak to this in a little bit, this can be a lot and it can feel like a lot. Our teachers are so dedicated to their craft and to this work. You can go to the next slide, Cynthia. At the same time that we were holding in-house, training and information sharing with teachers, conversations started happening in and around campus between our reading team and the different grade levels, and the buzz was starting to build. To foster this curiosity and to promote knowledge seeking, our reading team was sending along resources, anything that came across their desks, whether that was articles or podcasts or webinars. I remember they created a bulletin board. Cynthia made this fabulous reading rope out of, I think, exercise bands, and put a bulletin board in the lower school faculty room with QR codes to, get teachers interested when they're making photocopies. Use the QR code and it takes you to an interesting podcast, all with the aim to inspire teachers to continue to learn more. I love this email here that I included. I hope you don't mind, Cynthia. I was searching back through my email and just thinking about the resources, and I came across this one, and I love it because it demonstrates the approach that we took to helping our teachers build knowledge. Cynthia here is encouraging others to join in the learning. She's not requiring homework, or she's not saying, hey, I have all this knowledge, you need this knowledge. She's saying, hey, come along with me and join me in partnership in learning more, which was really important. I think culture is probably, I would say, what feels like the most, next to knowledge, the most important piece to being successful in making this shift. Our teachers at GFA love to learn, and most importantly, they love to engage in collaborative learning. So we use this to our advantage. We, found a way to make the learning about connecting with others. I remember an email going around from a kindergarten teacher about an upcoming Emily Hanford and Margie Gillis talk, where she put it out there for teachers to join for dinner before the event, which was really, again, just how can we find ways, and how can you find people as administrators or a reading team? Who do you know in your division, in your community, who's interested in learning more? How can you have them sort of partner with you and join you in inspiring others and motivating others to learn more as well? You can head to the next slide, Cynthia. In thinking about time and space, empathy is huge. At this point in our journey, when teachers were, there was a lot of buzz happening, things were coming out. I mean, just the language, I was looking back at it in preparation of this and just remembering the reading wars, a revolt, the debate. I was reading headlines. I've been teaching reading all wrong for all these years. It was so important at this time for us, and really for me as an administrator and us as a leadership team together, was to provide space for teachers to share their concerns or share their worries. They knew I was along for the ride in my own learning, and they knew that I was here to listen to them. I think it can sometimes be easy to say, oh, I have this colleague, they're just digging their heels. They're resistant to change. But what I came to realize is that those teachers who were most sort of hesitant or might have seemed resistant to change, it wasn't about not wanting to change. They were having this feeling of, wow, have I been teaching reading all of this time wrong? Right? That space of, you come to being a teacher, not just for a 9-to-5 job. This is a calling. It's a life of purpose work. And this can feel or leave teachers feeling really pretty vulnerable. Before I was in this role, I was a teacher in a classroom for 15 years. And I was listening to podcasts thinking, oh my goodness, did I not serve all of these children in the way that I should have? And that can be a lot. So having empathy for teachers and showing them that you too are along for the ride and also here to listen. And most importantly, remind them that they're amazing teachers who taught many children to read. Thanks, Cynthia. From there, our reading team wanted to continue to build the momentum that we were seeing and the energy. And so we started a volunteer book club. I highly recommend this to schools. We, as a school, decided we would support our teachers and purchase a book for anyone who wanted to join. This book club happened to read this resource here, Shifting the Balance. And they loved it. They got together a few times across the course of a few months in the mornings when we didn't have faculty meetings. And it was a great way to engage in conversation, to learn more, but also, again, that connection piece is so important. So this gave them an opportunity to connect with colleagues around a shared passion and shared interest, which was really great. Go ahead, Cynthia. From there, along with Kelly and Cynthia and another part-time reading specialist and our assistant head of lower school, we saw that everybody was really excited and we knew we could move a little faster. And so we decided to launch a reading inquiry group, which was a volunteer group at the time that was held during our once a week faculty meetings. We ended up meeting once a month, just in thinking about how we could balance this with the needs of, full faculty meetings and things like that. So we met once a month. Just to give you a sense, we're about 40 teachers in the lower school, and some of those teachers are co-curricular teachers. This volunteer group consisted of about 30 lower school teachers. So that just gives you a sense of, the great job that Kelly and Cynthia and our reading team did in getting people excited and wanting to learn more. What you see here are some of the topics that we covered in this group. Initially, as a team who was behind the scenes planning, we had a sense and an idea of some of the topics we should cover. And we also reached out to our faculty joining the group and sent them a survey and said, hey, what do you want to learn more about? What do you want to hear more about? And so in anticipation of each meeting, the reading team would send a pre-meeting agenda. Typically, we would ask our colleagues to listen to a podcast or read an article, and then we'd come together, I used to say over breakfast sandwiches, to geek out about the science of reading. And so we'd get together. A part of that group might have been a presentation from Kelly or Mary or our other reading specialist, just to give a little bit of information. And then there was time to get together to talk about the article or the podcast, and then think about ways that we could take what we've learned to directly inform our instruction. And I'm just seeing vocabulary on the screen here. We had a few sessions around vocabulary. That was a hot topic for our teachers. And after that, I had 2 upper elementary teachers who had shared, that it had truly transformed the instruction that they do around teaching vocabulary in book clubs, which was really great. So we highly recommend a reading inquiry group. And last but not least that I'll share in the moment is to celebrate and tell the story. We were doing so much work and hard work and exciting work that was, changing children's lives and also felt really motivating, inspiring for us. So here you can see our photos. At every chance we can, our administrative team, Kelly, Cynthia, teachers were sharing and celebrating our story. That top right photo is actually our head of school, Bob Whalen. Our biggest event of the year with parents is known as the State of the School at GFA. And here is Bob Whalen taking time on the stage to share with our pre-K through 12 entire family community about the work that lower school was doing around reading. The top left is Kelly and some of our teachers at each of the grade levels who are presenting to the rest of the faculty, pre-K through 12 to share about the science of reading. So this, again, it's one of those moments where you can champion your teachers, the work is hard, and also keep the momentum building. Thank you. Resources. We have, there's no doubt, and Kelly, you said it well, it takes the teacher, it's not just the curriculum. And at the same time, we have found, and we saw this was a question that some people have had, we have found that investing in some specific tools and curriculums has been helpful. One I'll just touch on is professional development. One thing I'll say about that as an administrator, I was attending webinars, reading books, traveling along with Kelly, soaking up as much knowledge as I could so that I could learn alongside my colleagues and have a sense and understanding, not only to be able to engage in conversation with them, but also share with families. You know, as we think about their specific children and as it relates to reading. So having in-house training, find your experts. Hopefully you have a Kelly and a Cynthia in your school, find your experts and get that training, but also encouraging colleagues to seek professional development outside of the school. For me, sometimes this meant, hey, Kelly sent along this great webinar, join it. I'll cover your class that day, or I'll find you coverage so that you can attend. Instruction, Kelly, Cynthia might share a little bit more about some of these pieces in her work, but we've invested in Hegarty. We've long invested in foundations. One of the biggest pieces that added great value to our program was that we as a lower school invested in a decodable library so that our teachers in their book clubs could be using decodable text to support the explicit instruction. I have Boost on here, which we use in connection to some of our assessment tools. Dibbles is the main assessment tool. Again, Cynthia might mention that here. Some of you might be familiar with that. M-Class is a system that we use in connection to Dibbles, which has been, we do not use F&P as a school. I saw a question about that in there. We can circle back to that later, but we found Dibbles is really helpful in looking at individual readers in each of the different areas. And then last but not least, we as a school have invested in a very strong reading team. I put in parentheses here, coaches, because that's exactly what they have been in order to make this transition and this shift as smooth and successful as it has been. We had to have the right reading team and learning team to partner with our teachers as coaches to help them through it. And you'll learn a little bit more about, just exactly what that looked like from one of our experts, Cynthia Homan. So Cynthia, I'll hand it over to you and I will mute myself. Thank you.
All right, thank you. As you can see, we are so lucky to have Jane at the helm of our ship because without her support and passion, much of this would have been much harder work. But I want to take you through how we've made these changes because that is the nitty gritty of how this all works. We have the information, we have the support. Now, what do we do with it? Sorry, now I'm in charge of my own slides. Okay, so our teachers here at GFA, we were using F&P. We were using a big box reading curriculum, probably like many other schools. And when we started to have these conversations about shifting away from F&P and leveled readings, our teachers got a little anxious. They were very used to identifying students by a letter. And when, what helped make them open to that change was when we questioned what does an F reader look like? What can they do? What does that mean? And it was hard to explain. So we pulled away, we started talking about this rope. Just to circle back to Jane, an exercise band would have been a genius way to make that rope, but they were actually plastic tablecloths, but good to note. We started pulling apart the rope for them and talking specifically about the different strands that make these up. And we looked at our curriculum, we looked at the things we had in place, and we talked about what needed to be changed. We had been using foundations for many years, and we also had been using Dibbles, and we had blocks of time for literacy. However, foundations was thought of as a completely separate subject area. It was not tied into reading. It was thought of as word study and maybe a little bit of spelling, but not necessarily relating to reading. Dibbles, was used, I've been here about 4 years. So before I was here, it was being used, but during the pandemic, it kind of got pushed off to the side. So we were going to talk about how we could re-engage with Dibbles and what that would look like and how we could make it more meaningful. And we wanted to make sure that the schedules aligned with combining the literacy time with the foundations time so that they could our teachers could better understand the relationship between those two subject areas. So when we started back with Dibbles, we really took a deep dive into the information we were getting. We sat with teachers and we went over the data. We do the benchmark 3 times a year, and then we progress monitor every 2 weeks with students who we are working on specific skills with. We use this information from the Dibbles to create differentiated groups for our reading. This is a first grade class, 14 students, so we're lucky we have these small classrooms, but we were able to look at the skills that needed support and break our students into reading groups. Something that we do with the assessment, so our reading team, Kelly, Mary, and I, we use MClass to administer the Dibbles. It's that platform that does it all on iPads, automatic. We currently are the ones pulling the students, but we sit with the teachers after and we go through all of the data. We have a grade level meeting, we go through the students. This is a form that I've adapted from Amplify that helps, and this is the first grade form, that helps break down the areas on the Dibbles that students fall into. So it enables us to help create those differentiated groups and focus on skills that the students need to work on. I've recently came across this from Matt Burns. He was generous to let me share it today. I personally have not used it yet, but I like that it's geared towards 2nd through 6th grade, using the Dibbles information as a class. To use your whole class need intervention, what do you do with that? Or it pulls out individual students and you can see which skills you need to focus on in your instruction. So really helpful to not just do the Dibbles, but to analyze the information you're getting from the Dibbles and make it meaningful in your instruction. Like I said, we were already using foundations in our K through 3 curriculum. But what Kelly and I did after when we knew we were making the shift, was we looked at how the scope and sequence worked, and we moved some things around in the best interest of our children. So we had this curriculum, we were using it, but we wanted to make sure our teachers understood how they could incorporate this into their reading curriculum. So what we do now is we meet weekly with a grade level. We look ahead at what their foundations curriculum is teaching, the skills. This is an example of a 1st grade. They're working on bonus letters. And we say, all right, we're going to work on these skills and foundations. And in our literacy groups, our differentiated literacy groups, we're going to reinforce the bonus letter skill. And what that might look like, and this was our general population group. So these are not the ones that are struggling. This is not the ones that are needing some more additional elevated support. These are our standard students. So here's our decodable text that we pulled that focuses on bonus letters. They are getting a word list ahead of time before they read. We're practicing reading these words. We're marking up the words with the bonus letters. The red words are what we're calling heart words. These are words that are in sight words, trick words, however we use them. We call them heart words, and we identify the part that is tricky at the moment, like in the word is. They haven't learned that the S can make a Z sound, so that's why it's a heart word. But these are the words that will be in this text. And we also talk a little bit about vocabulary, and this circles back to the reading inquiry groups, where we got some questions about, but there's no vocabulary in a decodable text, and decodable texts actually promote opportunities to discuss things like parts of speech, a noun and a verb. We know the word drink, we can decode it, but do we know that it can be used as a noun and as a verb and what that means? We talked about the word spell, how we often think the word spell as I spell a word, but in this story, it uses the phrase Ross will sit a spell. And what does that mean? And we talked about that and how it can be used differently. So even in this first grade decodable text, we were able to have a rich discussion about vocabulary. They practice reading phrases that will be in the book, not complete sentences, but we scoop them. We practice reading in chunks to improve fluency. We have them circle back through the text and look and find words that are following the pattern that might be in that text. So look for all the words that have the double F, the double L, the double S, and pull them out. So they're practicing that foundation skill. They're practicing their writing and encoding while doing their reading. And then on another day, this is not all one day, this is over a course of a week. Don't panic. We will reread this book several times over the course of a week. They'll do some simple comprehension, talking about main idea, main characters, and work on some sequencing. I wanted to just show you quickly, this was a Geodes book that went along with these were our stronger readers. They were using the Geodes to talk about bonus letters and glued sounds. And this book had a lot of vocabulary in it that they enriched themselves with. And then our struggling readers, we worked on a passage from UFly, which is University of Florida's reading program, and I'll share that later. But this was just a passage that had the bonus letters in it, a little simpler. And we differentiate our reading groups that way. This is an example of one of our third grade teachers work with some students who needed in the very beginning of the year to continue to work on some decoding skills. So they do the same type of thing. They preview words that will be in the text ahead of time. They do some vocabulary, and then they will read aloud. They will reread. They will rephrase questions in responses, and they will talk a little bit about some literary features. So, what's a metaphor? What's a simile? And they'll pull that out of the text as well. So we're taking it to a higher level, but we're still doing the same skills at those levels. We adopted Haggerty, which is a phonemic awareness piece, and we use that currently in kindergarten and first grade. We find that it's a fun way for the students to practice those skills, and we see immediate progress with that. So much so that by the end of first grade, we really start to phase away from that. Some other things that we added in grade 3, if any of you use foundations, we find that by third grade, the students are feeling a little fatigued with foundations, and they feel like they know the sounds. And therefore, some of our teachers were feeling that way. And we really wanted them to recognize the value in it. Some of our teachers, through these reading inquiry groups and studies on brain and how the brain learns to read, had a new appreciation for foundations and see it through a different lens now, which was really helpful. And so we've extended that time. They have, instead of just doing it a couple days a week, they now do it every day a week. And they are seeing the improvement in automaticity with multisyllabic words when they're reading. We added in a grammar and syntax component to our 3rd grade and 4th grade, where we specifically talked about, prepositions and what does that mean? And we're working on that, getting that into the lower grades, but that was something that we intentionally added in to that grade. In 4th grade, we didn't have mega words. We didn't have foundations any longer, so we incorporated mega words to address that need for additional work with morphology and prefixes, suffixes, roots, so that that important piece of that explicit phonics didn't completely go away. And ReadWorks is something that it's a free website that, if you're not familiar with it, that has wonderful articles that really help bring up that background knowledge, develop that background knowledge for students who might be struggling with some comprehension issues or vocabulary issues. And it's something that covers so many different topics. It's a really wonderful asset to the curriculum. So here are some takeaways for what you can do. I have to move my screen. For us, we spent a lot of time in the beginning looking at what we had in place and figuring out what would work for us as a school. What we did here is not necessarily the end all be all. It certainly isn't, but this was our journey and this is what worked for us. It's a work in progress. We're still finding things that we can tweak and fine tune and add and take away. We started with just 1 grade level. We started working with 1st grade. We didn't make any changes to 2nd or 3rd grade initially, or 4th grade. We wanted to really make sure that we got some teachers on board who could help spread that excitement. If we went in and tried to change everybody all at once, it wouldn't have been as successful as it has been. When the original 1st graders that we made this shift with moved up to 2nd grade, the 2nd grade teachers were really noticeably aware that these children had come in with different skills and they were more capable and more confident readers, and they wanted to understand what exactly happened and what can they be doing. And so now 2nd grade is bought into this shift, and they are they've changed some of the ways that they do reading instruction and reading groups, and it's moving up the ladder that way. We, using the DIBELS or whatever type of data system that you have at your school, to really do a deep dive and analyze where there are gaps. We were noticing that there were a lot of gaps in our our phonemic awareness and our nonsense word reading, and we started to put a lot of attention in that area, and we've seen a big improvement. Before, we weren't necessarily looking at where the problems were to address them. It was just sort of, oh, everyone's in the green, good. Everyone's in the red. What do we do? I think, going back to grouping students by by skill, can make people a little nervous, like, oh, we're labeling them as the Bluebird group or the Robin group, but it really is giving us the ability to work on specific skills that those students need. Our groups are not permanent groups. They're very fluid. They change throughout the year. I push into 1st and 2nd grade during literacy as one of the reading group teachers, and the groups rotate. So I am not always working with struggling readers. I'm sometimes working with the middle group. Sometimes I'm working with the high group, so that the classroom teachers are seeing everyone as well, so that it's not causing the stigma that if you're reading with Mrs. Homan, you're struggling. We see all the students and we can monitor their skills more closely, and it lets the teachers see their teachers as a whole. Their students as a whole, as opposed to just getting one group or half the class all year long. We are constantly working with the classroom teachers. Kelly works with 3rd and 4th grade. I'm working with first and second grade, and Mary works with kindergarten, and we meet with the teams weekly to plan. Like I said before, we go over the data. We are sharing what's been working, what hasn't been working. They're able to come to me with questions. It's a team approach. It's not, here's the book, go do it. We're constantly in collaboration, and that is really important when you are making a huge shift like this. So I know that I've been talking a lot about this. I know that one of the myths is that, if we just do phonics or we're just doing all these drills all the time, our students are going to just hate reading. It's not going to be fun anymore. They're going to be just reading boring stories. And that couldn't be more of a myth. And I'm going to let Jane wrap up with what we do here to ensure that our students still have that love of reading.
Sure. Thank you so much, Cynthia. I'm cognizant of time and want to be sure we have a few minutes just for some questions. And then also, I know we have some quick resources at the end, or maybe we could talk with Beth about the best way to share those. But Cynthia is exactly right. We, as a community of educators, we had so much energy around the work and the learning that we were doing. And one of the first topics that all of our teachers wanted to focus on in the reading inquiry group was, how do we foster a love of reading in our children? And also, how do we share with them this excitement that we have around reading? And so just two quick examples that were outgrowths of that reading inquiry group is one, just having, we actually used upper school students, photography students, to help us with this project. We had teachers take a picture of their favorite book, a children's book, and then write a little piece about why they felt it was their favorite children's book and why they recommended it. And then Cynthia, you could move on to the next, which is my absolute favorite, and we're coming up on it next month. So last year was the first year. We'll do it again every year. It was such a huge success. We used the month of February to be the Love of Reading Challenge. And so we set the challenge for all of our lower school students to read 1,000 books. They could read them at home with their families. They all take home hearts. And so we're engaging families in reading at home. It can be read aloud to them. It could be, independent reading, whatever it is, but they write the title and author, not their names. It doesn't matter. Each for all is our school motto, the title of the book and the author. And we put it up on the wall. Our dragon's our mascot, school mascot. So you can see the GFA dragon there, but it was such a beautiful way to inspire and encourage reading and bring our whole community, bringing our kids into the love. And then Cynthia, maybe we could think about, and I saw some people putting things in the chat. You want to move to the next slide? I think we had a picture of maybe some books. Somebody had written 7 Mighty Moves. I had mentioned Shifting the Balance. We could think about how we could share more resources. And actually, we have one slide with our faces and our emails on it. If you want to put that up, then maybe Kelly, what I could do is just ask you one of the first questions that came through that maybe you could get to before we have to close out. But there are emails for everybody. We'd love to connect. So Kelly, one of the questions was, can you have both the science of reading and a balanced literacy approach?
The short answer to that question is no. The longer, more accurate answer is not everything you're doing is wrong, and you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So that was one of the reasons we chose the book Shifting the Balance, because, to my earlier point, it's just really important to understand why you are doing what you're doing. And so you do need to make changes, but not everything. And I think you need to give your teachers the message loud and clear that not everything that they're doing is wrong, because it's not. And then let's see. Jane, I have a question for you. How are you addressing questions raised by K to grade 2 parents about children's reading levels with Fontes and Pinnell? Like, how do you address parents' concerns?
That's a great question. Cynthia mentioned this, we're no longer using F&P. We as a school, we're not in the habit of sharing levels with parents, in part because we know, right, that reading is so complex. It's made up of so many things. What's more important for us is for our teachers to be well-versed in all of the pillars of reading, so they could talk about all of these areas. Our teachers will sit down with our reading team, look at the dibbles, which gives much more detailed information around different pieces that make for successful reading to be necessary. And those are the things that we'll share. Our reading team has shared resources with teachers about the best way to communicate with parents. And again, so such an important piece of this has been our teachers learning so that they feel comfortable in taking ownership and talking about it. We've also held some parent education meetings where, you know, once every few months, we've had parents come for a different aspect of child development or teaching and learning and growing. And reading has been one of those, thinking about how parents can support what we're supporting in the classroom with questions and prompts at home. A lot of parents wonder about foundations. How do I help with this homework? And so we include parent information. Foundations does a great job of including parent information around that. Heggerty was mentioned. We've actually given parents pieces of Heggerty because their phonemic awareness, it's a fun, like phonological awareness. All the pieces that they have are really fun for parents to do at home. So. And let's see if we have time. Maybe we have time for one more, and then Beth might come back on the screen. Maybe Cynthia, you can answer this. What foundational reading programs would you recommend to align with what we now know about the science of reading? And we've mentioned some, but maybe you can.
That's a pressure, me recommending a program. I think I know that there here in Connecticut in our public schools, there's a lot of push to switch to a different curriculum, and it's causing some anxiety. I think we have to be careful with a box of, like, you know, materials. I think you know, we use foundations. We were fortunate to be able to purchase the Geodes decodables that go along with foundations, and I know there's a program, Wit and Wisdom, that aligns with that ties in content area with reading with foundations. I mentioned before that the UFly, University of Florida, this is it's amazing to me, and I think a lot of schools are adopting this. It almost is similar to foundations. It has phonemic awareness. It has phonics. It has passages. The manual is not that expensive, and most of the materials are already online for free. Lots of decodable passages there. Kelly, do you have any to add to this, or?
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think you have, like, what's really important is teachers knowing the science behind reading and understanding what they're teaching. That said, there is no need for teachers to create their own curriculum. It's, you know, that's what curriculum developers are paid for. Teachers don't have time to do that. So you do have to provide them, you know, with good resources, but there's many, you know, well, at least a few curriculums that are appropriate.
Kelly, I'm going to jump in for a minute because a question just came up in the chat, and I know you could speak to this about Orton Gillingham in the classroom. Because I know you're an Orton Gillingham person.
Yes. What specifically about Orton Gillingham?
Well, the question is just Orton Gillingham in the classroom. I'm guessing maybe how is that integrated?
Okay.
How does it work with the other programs?
Yes. Like if you look at Orton Gillingham is an approach. It's kind of a philosophy. It's not a program. So if you look at under the umbrella of Orton Gillingham, Wilson is under that umbrella. Foundations is a program that is based off of Wilson. So Foundations is a program that is based off of the Orton Gillingham philosophy. So is UFly. You know, so absolutely Orton Gillingham in the classroom. I think I said earlier, it's really important for teachers to understand that students who are dyslexic don't need something radically different than what should be happening in the classroom. They just need it broken down more systematic, and a lot more repetition. So you want to have all of those things aligned. You can't intervene your way out of a tier 1 issue. Like, you have to have good tier 1 classroom instruction. So I hope that answered the question.
Okay, so let me spin off of that for a minute, Kelly. We also had a question about ELL learners.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, I mean, everything that we said is definitely going to apply to ELL learners. And also there's that extra component of the language comprehension and making sure you support their vocabulary development and their background information, because we know that's all really important for reading comprehension. But the word recognition, that's going to be, you know, important as well. So it really, what benefits the knowledge that you get from understanding the science of reading and the curriculum and materials and strategies that you use from that are going to also benefit ELL learners.
thanks, Kelly. One more very specific question, we'll move on. Someone asked, does DIBELS also address comprehension?
So
You want to do that, Cynthia?
yeah, there's a maze component to the DIBELS starting in 2nd grade, which is their version of what they assess comprehension with. It's not as thorough as some other ways to measure it, with like the way I know our 4th grade teachers were worried about not having a lot of questions to have students respond to, but the maze breaks down areas. If the student is having trouble with decoding or fluency, they're going to be having trouble with comprehension. So the maze is measuring those factors. You're not going to have the questions to students to respond to, but you're going to be able to see areas that the student may be struggling with that's going to impact their comprehension.
It's a broad measure of comprehension.
Gosh. Thank you all, Kelly, Cynthia, Jane. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. By the comments in the chat, I could see there's excitement. People are eager to take this back to their own schools. Any other last comments, Cynthia, Kelly, or Jane, before we sign off? Look at this, we're right on schedule.
We just want to say thank you. You know, I hope our passion has come through. I was glad to hear that word. We're really excited about the work. We're really proud. You know, there's just 3 of us on this webinar here, but we have an entire division of teachers who have put in so much time and effort. And again, just thinking of making it about connection. It's the best way to empower our teachers. And, you know, it's hard work, but we're here to do it. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your sharing your resources and your emails. I see things coming through the chat. Again, thank you all who were able to join us this morning, and I hope you stay warm over these next few days. All right. Bye-bye.